I saw something glowing as I was driving past a cemetery, and it wasn't behaving like anything that was a spirit. So when I was driving to work, this was probably about a year ago, I saw a green orb that ended up flying in front of my windshield while I was on my way to work. And it was about 6 a.m., so the sun hadn't quite come up yet. And this thing came out in front of my windshield, and it circled around and it darted around and stuff like that. And then it shot off into the night. And when I was discussing this with some of my friends, they were like, "Oh man, you saw a spirit orb." And I was like, "Oh, that's what they call them?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Wow, I didn't even think about it like that. I didn't even think it was something spiritual, because at the time I didn't make the connection that I was actually driving past the cemetery at that time." And as it turns out, people have been seeing these kind of objects in and around cemeteries and in the woods and stuff like that for centuries. And what I'm starting to think is that maybe it's not necessarily ghosts. Okay? Maybe we're misrepresenting what we think it is. Like, maybe it's not ghosts at all. In Ireland, they call them fairies. Some people, the more recent people, they call them orbs. They call them spirit orbs and things like that. And I got to thinking about this, and I started just running the cogwheels in my head. And I started thinking, like, well, maybe it's a UFO. And maybe these things have an interest in our dead, and so let's say for instance, a buzzard. Okay, if you're driving up the road and you see a buzzard on the side of the road and it's standing next to roadkill, you don't think that the two are connected. You think, like, oh, he's there to eat, right? He's there because he's hungry. He wants to chew on that squirrel or whatever it is, right? But maybe these potential UFOs actually have interests in the cemeteries. They have interests in our dead. Like, I mean, if you think about it, it is a rich environment for DNA collection, or, something along those lines, where, they may be observing us and our rituals and the way that we do things. I mean, it's something to consider. And I also think that, like here's something to think about that I just recently came up with, is that why is it that ghosts, when people have ghost sightings, the ghosts, they're always wearing dresses. They're always wearing formal clothes. It's not like you would see somebody, an apparition of somebody that is, let's say, wearing a backwards hat and like a Limp Bizkit t-shirt or something like that, right? So maybe sometimes when people are seeing these apparitions, that maybe it's a projection, and that's what the projection is. That's their understanding of us. They see us in our coffins or whatever, and they're like, oh, well, they got to be wearing a suit. They got to be wearing a dress. It's a man. It's a woman, and it's something that's really out there. I haven't really heard anybody talking about it much, or at all, actually. This is just something that I came up with. But in a way, it kind of checks out, because just because the buzzard's there doesn't mean that the buzzard caused the death, right? And maybe it's not fairies. Maybe it's actually something that's technologically advanced. So, like, when I was driving up the road and that thing was bouncing around, in front of my windshield before it took off. I mean, it never crossed my mind that it could have been a ghost. But there is something else that I really want to talk to you guys about, and it's regarding my friend Craig. And he used to do supernatural investigations. The thing was called South Carolina Supernatural Investigations, or SCSI. And he was in a cemetery at about 2 a.m. This happened about 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And he was in a cemetery, and he was doing one of his investigations, and he was on his way out. He was just snapping pictures. He was just randomly snapping pictures and wasn't looking at any of them. He's just going beep, 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 and hitting it on his way out. And when he went back to check out the footage, okay, he saw something that was really compelling, and he sent them to me in a text. And my initial thought was, holy crap, dude, you caught a freaking ghost. Like, you got a real one, And it's like one of those things for him. It was one of those things that it was so good that nothing else that he ever captured after that ever compared. And I really want to show these pictures to you guys, because some orbs are green, supposedly, like the one I saw. Some orbs are blue. Some are white. And according to these pictures, okay, I guess this was a white orb, okay? And here you go. So in the first photo, you can see up there in the top right corner, okay, it's just like a flash. And then he zoomed in, and what he did was he zoomed in as far as he could, and then he clicked the picture, and then he zoomed in some more, and he took another picture, and he zoomed in, and he screenshots, and then he took screenshots until he finally blew it up as close as he could, and you can make out somebody's face. You can make out like something that's standing there. It looks like he's wearing a suit. Okay. Now there are some old Civil War graves and stuff. There's some Confederate graves, and I believe he told me that that particular apparition in that photo was actually standing in front of a Civil War veteran's grave. Can't say for sure, but it kind of checks out, because there are other Civil War graves in that old cemetery. And I'm starting to think that we've possibly been mislabeling these things for centuries, and people who saw them back in Ireland or see them today, they have characterized them as being like mischievous tricksters of some kind, like, and have actually like moved objects and stuff like that. Now, I don't know if it's like quite like poltergeist stuff, like where like you go home and all of your living room furniture is piled up in your kitchen or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't think it's quite like that, okay? But possibly these things may even have the ability to move things in their immediate surroundings. So that's another thing to think about, that all of these things that we're considering as ghosts, that it may be almost like a defense mechanism of these particular objects, okay? Because if you have everybody thinking that you're something that you're not, okay, like let's say if everybody's thinking that it's ghostly stuff, and you're projecting images of, let's say, a deceased person, okay, then people go, oh God, it's Betty Sue. Oh, it's Betty Sue's ghost, right? And nobody's looking for possible UFOs, okay? But, by definition, one of these orbs, it is unidentified, it is flying, and by the way that it reacts and the way that it moves and stuff like that, it is a thing, okay? So I guess they still could be classified as UFOs, even though they're small. we can't really wrap our heads around it because, I mean, we in our understanding of it, we think of things in terms of size. Like we think of an airplane, we think it's a big thing. We think of a helicopter, it's a big thing. We don't think that you could see a UFO that's possibly the size of a bottle cap, which is the size of the one that I saw. Okay, that's the size it was, and it was glowing. It was emitting light. Okay, and it matched my speed while I was driving up the road. As soon as it flew in front of me, I went, whoa, and I laid off the gas. I started, braking. I didn't like slam on the brakes or something like that, but I like backed off, and the thing slowed down with me, and it was like wee wee wee, and was hovering around my windshield right in front of me, directly in front of me. Okay, probably was about as far away from I am to the camera. I'm talking like if I could have reached through that glass, I could have touched this thing. But I imagine that might be suicidal, because here's something, okay? If you ever have an opportunity to lay hands on one of these things, I recommend you don't do it. Because if you look at my last video, the one that I was talking about where I got hit in the eyes with a freaking laser beam from one of these UFOs, okay, that thing is dangerous. So don't touch things you don't understand. Don't touch snakes, whether you think they're venomous or not, okay? Just out of precaution. I'm just putting that out there. If you ever have an opportunity to lay hands on a flying saucer, don't do it. Don't grab the sphere. We might not be looking and seeing different things, okay? We might all be seeing similar objects, okay, between like myself and other people in Ireland or in England or wherever else these things are found, okay? We might be looking at the same things, but we all just have different explanations of it. The Irish call them fairies, we call them something else. And, I think that there's a lot to consider with that, but, just because these things are floating around inside cemeteries doesn't mean that it's Aunt Becky. Just because it's near her grave doesn't mean it's her. So if you guys are liking the content that I'm bringing to you and you guys think that it's worthwhile, I hope that you guys subscribe to the channel and like the video. And I think that's all I have for you for today. And I'll probably touch on this numerous times in the future. So if you guys want to get more information or anything like that, and you want to, maybe I left something out because, I've re-recorded this and I might have thought I covered it, but I didn't, or something like that. Or I covered it in a video that I erased, and maybe I forgot that, that I erased it, and you know what I mean? It got mixed up. I thought I talked about something, but didn't. But any case, I hope you guys have yourselves a great rest of your day and a good weekend, or a good weekend ahead of you. So you guys take care, and we'll see you.